Hey guys, Scott here. Today I want to have a discussion about the very common talking point that survivors can make a million mistakes, but a killer makes a single mistake and it costs them way more. And so the general sentiment is that killer mistakes are punished way more than survivor mistakes. And I want to discuss how I think that's not true. Now, I don't necessarily think they're punished less. I think they're sort of punished equally because if you think about it, yeah, a killer is 100% of their own team, right? So if a killer makes a mistake, that's 100% of the team making a mistake. Whereas if a survivor makes a mistake, it's just 25% of the team making a mistake. So it's, at face value, you would think, of course, killer mistakes are more punished. But it's not really that simple because you kind of have to think about the butterfly effect of what happens when you like hook or down a survivor, right? So let's look at a scenario where a survivor makes a mistake and a killer makes a mistake. So a killer makes a mistake, and let's say that the survivor lives for 20 more seconds. Now, you have to think about time efficiency in generator seconds. So if you let a survivor, and you're chasing one survivor and no one else is hooked, if you chase a survivor and you make a mistake and it gives them 20 more seconds of chase, you've essentially given the survivor team 60 seconds of generator time overall, because that's 3 other survivors that are potentially doing gens. And that seems like a lot. And frankly, it is. It can be absolutely game losing to make a single mistake as killer. However, my argument is that the same exact thing is true for Survivor, because people will say, well, you're only 25% of the team, so it's not as impactful if you make a mistake. But I disagree, because let's look at what happens when you actually down and hook somebody. So when you hook somebody, yes, that's 25% of people not doing gens anymore. Now, let's say the guy's on second stage for purposes of the whole devil's advocate argument here. So you got a minute to go save that guy, right? So really, when you actually hook that person, you're not just stopping this person from working on gens, you're also stopping another person that has to come save this person from working on gen. So really, by hooking them, you're actually pressuring 50% of the team to not do generators, right? Now, good killers are very much aware of this and will look for the person that's coming for the save and then intercept them and begin chasing them as well. It's just an example of where camping and proxy camping is almost not even a good idea. It's actually better to chase somebody else, because if you intercept the person coming for the save and that guy's only got 30 seconds left on his timer, well, now the guy in the hook's not doing gens, the guy you're chasing is not doing gens, and now unless they want that guy to die and hook, now another person has to come off a gen. So just by hooking one person because they made a mistake, you're actually stopping 75% of the team from doing generators. And that is actually extremely impactful. It's just not as abundantly clear and in your face as swinging into a dead hard and, having a gen pop in 20 seconds later because of it. You have to think a bit more outside the box of, I feel like you have to kind of play Survivor a lot to understand what happens when somebody really gets hooked. Now, it's a bit different if it's their first hook, because then, yeah, you can let them sit on there for 45 seconds and still feel relatively safe. I'm just for the purposes of the example, it's if they're on the second stage and you intercept the person that goes for the save, you're pressuring almost the entire team, which is very big. And now when you're chasing that original guy that was going to save and you eventually down him, well, now the other guy's unhooked, and now they're either going to go to gens while they're injured, and that makes it much easier to snowball, so you can down them a lot faster, or they spend time healing, which means they're not doing gens, so it's still a lot of time not spent on a generator. And so, yeah, when you think about it like that, you're actually doing a lot more capitalizing off a survivor mistake than it appears. But let's be a bit more realistic. Let's look at the things that people talk about, and it's usually perks, right? They'll bring up dead hard, decisive strike, bar time. They allow unhooks or unsave hooks and things like that. They allow you to you misposition yourself in a loop and you dead hard for distance. Not much a killer can do about that, so it allows them to make mistakes, and that's all true. The thing is, though, you're trying to make a one-to-one comparison of an asymmetric thing. It doesn't make any sense to me. The killer is trying to kill the survivor. That's their goal. And the survivors are trying to power generators and escape and leave. That's their goal. They have 2 separate goals. So when you say a survivor can dead hard for distance and there's nothing the killer can do about it, it's are you implying that the killer should have a dead hard to make up for it? They're separate roles. The comparisons don't make any sense. If you want a comparison, okay, so a killer can't do anything about a survivor dead harding for distance, right? Okay, let's say a survivor makes a mistake and then goes down to a Bubba, and then the Bubba just face camps them. There's nothing they can do about that either. They're dead. If a Bubba wants to face camp something, there's literally nothing that they can do to stop it, and they're just going to die. It's the same exact thing, but you can't just make direct one-to-one comparisons like dead hard, DS, OP because they allow them to make mistakes, because it implies that you're saying that, well, the killer doesn't have DS or dead hard, because they shouldn't. It's a separate role. They're not doing the same thing as the survivor is. So making that comparison, at least to me, it doesn't really make any sense. So when you look at it like that, it's a lot less black and white. And the thing is, the most snowbally thing that can possibly happen in any match of DBD is a killer killing a survivor while there's still like 2 or 3 gens still up. Because if you make that 4v1 into a 3v1, that's pretty much game over. Like, it's very hard to come back from that, because then think about it. If there's only 3 players left, look at the time efficiency now. Now when you hook somebody and then you intercept the guy going to save, no one is doing gens. Because another guy is going to have to come off and save him. And this is called the spiral of recovery, where they're just scrambling to not die at this point, and gens are not even on their mind. So that is how snowbally it can be. And killers really need to rely on that snowball to win. And so that's the biggest snowbally thing that can happen, is as a survivor makes a mistake and then dies early. That's the worst thing that can possibly happen. Swinging into a dead hard is never going to have the same detriment as killing a survivor with a couple of gens still up. It's just the time efficiency. It gets cut so heavily that there's basically just nothing that the survivors can do, short of having like a ridiculously good map. I'm not saying it's impossible, but the killer would have to be really bad, or they'd have to be on like Fractured Cowshed or the game or something, some ridiculously strong map for the killer to be able to, not still win that. So yeah, you really got to look at it a bit less one-sided. Yeah, it's immediately more abundant when a killer makes a mistake and, swings into a dead hard and they gain 20 seconds of distance and a gen pops. You get immediate feedback on that. So it makes sense that you would go, well, killers are punished more. But really, if you think about what's happening when you hook somebody, it is actually almost the same amount, I would argue, of potential snowbally action, especially if the survivor's like on their second stage or something. And, there's a billion variables that go into it. It's not like, I can just say this as a blanket statement, because, yeah, like there's a billion variables. There's no way you can accurately predict every single splintering event that happens because you made a mistake. It's just impossible. It's a bit easier to see as killer because you don't hit somebody, people do gens. That's immediate result. But when you see a survivor make a mistake, people think it's not as impactful because you just can't immediately see it actually happen. You just can't get that immediate feedback that lets you know that the mistake just cost you the game. But very often, all it takes is one survivor making a mistake. Then I hook them in an unsafe area. I get a free down on the person that's coming to save that person because it's an unsafe area that I've made over time, breaking pallets and stuff like that. And now that guy's slugged, this guy's on the hook, another guy comes to save, I down him, this guy on the hook dies, then I pick up the guy and the game's over, like off of one survivor mistake. So it can happen just as easily on, I think, the killer side as it is the survivor side. It's abundantly more clear when a killer makes a mistake what happens. So I just thought I'd give a bit more of a insight onto that side of things. Because, I always see that same exact argument. Survivors can make a billion mistakes, killer makes one. But really, any mistake can result in the end of the game. And I think that's the end point I wanted to get across. But that is it, guys. Thanks for watching. See you next time.